Right now, well, this afternoon, we will be talking about FinTech 101, basically giving a basic introduction, an overview to the FinTech sector, try and answer your basic questions about what FinTech is and the impacts it's having. So financial technology has never been more relevant than it is now. In an age of pandemics, social and economic upheaval, FinTechs are effectively driving impactful change and can play a fundamental role in addressing financial inclusion. In this session, we'll be exploring the basics of what FinTech is, provide an introduction to some of the technologies that drive it, and how it's impacting existing models of financial services. We encourage your active participation in this afternoon's session, so I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question for today's speaker, you can pop your questions in there. Also, if you'd like to, speak out loud, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you accordingly. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. I'm very pleased to welcome Michal Szymanski, our Chief Executive Officer here at the Mauritius Africa FinTech Hub. Michal comes from a background in education, entrepreneurship and incubation. As head of one of the leading incubators in South Africa, he interviewed, worked with and mentored over 6,000 entrepreneurs from idea stage to established businesses. He's run his own business and was a guest speaker around SME development for many corporates across numerous industries. As head of incubation for the oldest technology hub in Africa, he worked in clusters of innovation such as FinTech, EdTech, Biotech, and has launched some of Africa's first dedicated entrepreneurial development programs in some of these clusters. He was appointed as CEO of MAFH in 2018. Welcome, Migs. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to you at this point.
Okay, thanks so much, Lisa, and good afternoon, everybody. Every time I hear somebody reading that out, I can't believe it's me. Either I'm getting very old, or a lot of things have happened in my lifetime this far. So a very warm welcome to everybody. I will be covering the basics of FinTech 101 with you today. Just a slight, we're having a conversation before the start of the session, and Lisa and I were joking that there's courses out there that tell you the basics of what FinTech is, ranging from 12 hours, some of the courses in Singapore, to 24 weeks, for example, at Columbia University. So it's what we're going to try to cover in 45 to 50 minutes is really based on the understanding the basics. And my hope for everybody that's attending today is that you leave this session and have at least an understanding of what this is and how it's going to impact your life going forward, because you might not even know it, but it's really impacting your day-to-day life and how you interact with money throughout your life. So that's what the purpose for me of this session is, to give you some context, apply that context to some of the examples, real life examples, and what's happening in the world out there at the moment. And then maybe we also look at the future and more specifically around how this is going to impact Africa. Because there's still a lot of challenges that exist on the continent. There's still a lot of opportunities that exist on the continent, and we're seeing a lot of people talk about Africa leapfrogging certain technologies, and that's certainly happening specifically in the financial technology space. So I'll kick off with the presentation. I normally like to be, anybody knows me here, I like to be quite interactive, but I have been told that the best format and way to do it today would be to wait for the Q&A session afterwards. So I'm not a big fan of chalk and talk. I normally prefer doing this in person. So I'm hoping to see a lot of you around the corridors at the hub or at many other of our workshops in the future. So I'll kick off very quickly, just in terms of the light touch propaganda, as I like to call it. What is MAFH? Very briefly, we're the official FinTech Association of Mauritius. Our goal is to build, consolidate the local ecosystem, but also integrate it into the rest of the continent. And I'll touch in the beginning around both terminologies that are used in that one sentence. The first one is a little bit more about FinTech, and the second one being a little bit more about ecosystem, because these two words are synonymous, and a lot of people are using these words interchangeably and in every single conversation. So I think understanding the very basics of those two terms will help us with understanding where this is going at a later stage. So very brief propaganda about us. We're based obviously here with interactions to the rest of the world. We're also part of the African FinTech network. And before I talk about that, I just wanted to point out that 15 years ago, there was no such thing as FinTech associations for their respective countries. And now nearly every single country in the world has a FinTech association in some way and form. Okay, so what speaks to is that there's been this massive driver in this space, and a lot has changed over the last 5, 10, 15 years at an absolute maximum in this space. I mean, we're seeing a lot of consolidations of the various associations. For example, Japan, I think, had 15 and now have 2 or 3. So we're seeing a real convergence happening on the ground of these associations, but the fact that every country has a FinTech association, very similar to, for example, a banking association or whatever other association, means that every single country in the world is taking this very seriously, right? So that's what we do here at MAFH, and how we integrate into the rest of the African continent, which is the second part of what we do here as our Pan-African mandate, is Mauritius as part of the African FinTech network. So what that means is that we've integrated now with 34 other African countries, and the goal for the African FinTech network is to have all 54 countries talking in unison, working, collaborating together for the benefit of each various country or ecosystem or jurisdiction on the ground. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context around what we do on a day-to-day basis, how serious this is, the fact that there are associations out there. A lot of you would have heard about Singapore, around the Singapore FinTech Festival that's been driven by the Singapore FinTech Association, one of the largest ones in the world, for example. So I'm sure you would have heard, if you haven't, you will be hearing a lot more if you take a little bit of interest in this space. So very quickly, let's start off right at the beginning. FinTech. Everybody's throwing the term around. Everybody's using it as a catch-all for everything from I'm not going to name names or circumstances, but effectively people are throwing this term around and making it more complicated than it should be. If you boil it down, it basically is financial technology, to what Lisa said in the first place in the description of what we're talking about here today. The taking and usage of the technology in the financial services space is what FinTech is about. Right? You can have a formal definition, and you can look at many other things. You Google what is FinTech, you'll get the gist of it. But please don't let anybody overcomplicate this. Yes, there's many verticals inside this space, but it's not as scary or daunting as many people make it out to be. Maybe sharing a personal story, when we go out and we communicate with people on the ground and use the word FinTech, we can automatically see people going, well, that's too high grade, that's scaring us. Actually, it's not. It's how is technology impacting the space, and how is it changing our day-to-day lives? And that's what FinTech is all about. But for us, as the official FinTech association, it's a little bit more than that, because for us, it means that technology is allowing human beings and empowering our lives to be better. And you're probably sitting there asking yourself, oh, how does that work? Right? Well, let's boil it down to us being as a species. What is the one resource that we all have that we can't get back? It's time. Right? Technology is there to serve human beings at the end of the day, and specifically in the financial technology space or FinTech space, you not having to go and queue in a bank queue, because you can do it from the comfort of your own home, saves you time. Right? And this is what technology is allowing us as a species to do, is there to serve us and make our lives better. And the application of the technology in the financial services space gives us an opportunity not only to save a precious resource such as time, but also allows us to reach scale, break down costs, because now we're able to reach more people more effectively, make transactions quicker, faster, and cheaper across the board. Okay. And what that means is that people will benefit from all of these on the ground. And for us, it's also around financial inclusion, right? Because a lot of the formal financial services space has been excluding a lot of people that might not have money in the bank account or zeros in their bank account, because society tends to judge us based on what we have, how many numbers we have in our bank account. And for us, for me personally, that is fundamentally wrong. We are human beings. How can somebody who has less money than us have less opportunities to financial services products and pay more for accessing that money because they're in a higher risk category? Maybe the way we're judging risk is wrong, and it's been proven. New models are coming up every single day that we haven't been doing it right, and we have been excluding people because the models we have been using are not working in today's day and age, or have evolved in such a way that it allows more people to participate in the digital economy. And that, for me personally, is why FinTech is quite an exciting space to be in. Because imagine, I'll use an example. Your credit scoring, and I know I'm going to touch on it a little bit later, but a lot of us know that when we go and apply for a loan, we have a credit scoring list where we get ranked according to your risk category based on your previous past records, your transactions, loans you've done in the past, everything about you. There's a collection of data somewhere along the way, right? Now there's a FinTech out there that is not using that to judge whether you are a good human being to pay that back, because let's face it, you might be a good human being today and pay all your money back on time over the last 10 years, but tomorrow that might change, okay? And you might not be able to do it, and the models might not be able to factor that in. But there's different models that are evolving. One of which is, for example, releasing loans to small businesses based on the number of times that you recharge prepaid cell phones. I know this is trying to blur it out, right? It's a new way of credit scoring. It means every time you're going to be using your cell phone, every time you use it, you create a history about yourself. And based on how much you recharge your phone, you can repay some of those loans on your next charge up, because you will be using your phone again, and therefore a small amount can be deducted going forward. So that's what we mean about empowering and making people's lives better. It has really the potential to do that. If you look at the scorer, for example, people sending money from overseas back home in the olden days, I like to call it olden days, even though it was during my younger days, let's call it that. You know, people sending money from overseas back home so that their grandmother or family could use the money to feed the family back home or pay for certain bills. On average, sometimes it costs you between 10 and 20%, 10 and 20% to send your money home, your own money, right? 9 intermediaries somewhere in the value chain, on average, let's call it that, each taking a piece of your money so that you can send your money home to your family. Right. So today, that's already been dropped by using technology. That figure has already dropped by nearly 10 times, okay, across the board. So it's becoming much cheaper, and more money is going to the people that need it. So that's when we talk about the fact that technology is able to empower and make people's lives better. That's what we're talking about. Right? It has its own challenges and it has its own complications, and we'll dive a little bit deeper in that. But basically, the bottom line is FinTech is technology applied to the financial services space, and we go a little bit further. And last thing here that I put here, for example, personally I call it convergence tech, because no matter what you do, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're in fishing, whether you're in mining, whether you're in engineering, anywhere in the world, money needs to move from point A to point B. Okay, so we can't get away from that. Okay, that's the world we live in. So therefore, no matter what you do, or what you're going to be doing, or what you're doing today, or have done yesterday, this is going to be impacting you going forward. So it's not a fad. A lot of people saying 5 years ago, oh, it's a craze, it's a fad, it's going to go away. It's not. It's part of the day-to-day life. And the innovation today, by the way, will be common knowledge or common usage tomorrow. And that's changing on a day-to-day rapid pace throughout the globe. So that's kind of just a very brief outline on the word. The second one, ecosystem, another big buzzword being thrown around. Basically, an ecosystem is just components of many parts working together for the benefit of all. Okay, that's personally my kind of definition of it. Everybody makes up an ecosystem. It's not just the banks. It's not just the startups. It's not just the regulators. It's not just academia. It's not just investor. It is everybody. That is what an ecosystem is. If you look at the definition, for example, of an ecosystem in nature, it means everything is in balance. Right? There's a perfect balance between that. So when we talk about ecosystems and developing ecosystems in our own countries, in our own jurisdictions, we're talking about all the stakeholders that in some way and form impact this industry or this sector in the various country or jurisdictions. And some of you might be thinking, academia, wow, and we've had this before, academia, how are they a stakeholder? Well, if you think about it, if you don't have the skills, right, and by the way, it's a critical one, I'll get to that in a little bit. If you don't have the skills, if you're not preparing the youth of the future for the skills that are needed for the jobs of the future and the jobs that are now, the futuristic jobs that are now, then we're not going to have an industry. Okay, so they need to be part of these discussions because it's going to impact them, right? It's going to impact the students. It's going to impact people at schools. A great example, I heard at my son's, who's 10 years old, at son's school, right? The teachers and the education system is preparing him for jobs that haven't even been created yet. Okay, jobs haven't been created yet, right? And there's new jobs coming online all the time. So how do we make sure we future-proof the future working environment or ecosystem or resources on the ground and upskill the people to make sure that they're able to add value to them? That's why all of those stakeholders are critical in the development of any ecosystem. If you have governments who are regulating but not listening to the private sector, it's going to fail. If you have governments and regulators, if you have a private sector that's doing their own thing but not listening or communicating to the regulators, it will fall flat. Right? So by ecosystem, we talk about all the stakeholders coming together for the benefit of everyone at the end of the day. Right? So we've got those two kind of buzzwords out the way quite early on. Right? A very quick slide I put up here. Why can't FinTechs be ignored? When I first got into Mauritius, and we were using this slide back in 2019, we had, what is the figure there? 48 FinTech unicorns valued at $187 billion. Okay, that was 2019. 2021, 2 years later, we have 134 FinTech unicorns valued at $1.4 trillion. Okay, let me just repeat that. 2 years ago, right, the valuation for 48 FinTechs, and Unicorn is a company that's worth $1 billion or more, right? Valuation, right? 48 valued at nearly 200 billion. And this was in last year, we had 134 valued at 1.4 trillion. Okay, $1.4 trillion. Okay, so once again, that speaks the growth that this industry is going through. Right? And that's why we can't ignore it anymore. It's not only is it impacting everybody's life, and I can promise you right now, if you have a credit card, if you've interacted with an ATM, that is FinTech, right? Because FinTech is both software and hardware, right? So it's still technology in some way and form that's impacting your interaction with the financial services. Right? So this is impacting you every single day. If you use an ATM, you've had interaction. If you use your card, you've had interaction. If you made a payment, if you used an online platform, if you've raised money online through a crowdfunding platform such as FinTechs, for example. Right? And I've used FinTechs specifically here for the local context because over the last 2 or 3 years that they've been around, they've crowdfunded 100 million rupees to small businesses who were able to secure money, right, short-term loans for their business through the power of individuals from the side, from anywhere in the country. Okay, that is what the technology has allowed to do. So those businesses have accessed money that previously they couldn't have had. Now they might need short-term capital injections for some of their projects or for some of the business, and they've achieved that. So FinTechs locally has been able to achieve that in 2 or 3 years of business, 100 billion rupees worth of loans going to the startup space. Okay. So what I'm saying here is it's not going away. Okay. Technology is democratizing the financial services space and allows everybody to participate more in this digital economy moving forward. And once again, speaking to what I said right up front is why I believe that it has the power to do good. Because if you believe in a project, you believe in a cause, you can donate to, or through the crowd or through the cloud. You can donate, you can invest, you can do a lot of things with technology where 10, 15 years ago, there was no such thing happening. Okay? So it just can't be ignored. It's going to be impacting you if it already hasn't impacted you. Right? Very quick overview. Right? A lot of people say FinTech, this is a fad, it's been around for 15 years. Actually not. I was reading an interesting article the other day about the first telegraph cable that was launched, I think, in 1850 between the states. I don't know the exact date, but they were used for the first time. They used a form of technology in the financial services space to interact. I think it was on the stock market, buying and selling. Right? If you look at, for example, the ATM, that's been around now for the last 30, 40 years. That is still, some people are calling it FinTech 2.0. Where the banks have started to digitize and move and become a more technology adopter in this space, and that's why, for example, they started shifting more and more services online when the internet came online, and they started offering services such as mobile banking apps, mobile applications, insurance products, etc. going forward. So some people call that FinTech 2.0. And then, of course, what's called FinTech 3.0, post the 2008 financial crash. Personally, I think it's a lot of people lost faith in the financial system across the board. A lot of people were tired of a few people making decisions that cost a lot of people on the ground their money, their savings disappearing. And so there's been a revolution to say, well, actually, we want to have more control of what we do with our finances and how we interact with our finances going forward. So some people argue it's been an evolution. Some people argue it's been a revolution. A revolution simply being it's been very quick. And I believe the last couple of years we've seen a revolution in the type of services and the type of technologies that are coming through, where we're seeing very rapid changes in an ecosystem going forward. So there's been an evolution and a revolution kind of simultaneously in some aspects moving forward. So basically, we've seen massive shift over the last, since 2008, so what, 12, 13, 14 years. We've seen a lot of industries rise up. We've seen a lot of FinTechs rise up. We saw a lot of people who lost their jobs in the financial services sector, or people who've been involved in the financial services sector start their businesses because they've identified opportunities that exist. But fundamentally, this has been driven because the consumer or customer mindset, right? The customer has changed. Right? We no longer, as customers, want to wait in bank queues. We no longer want to submit all our KYC documents, or our documents we require for various regulatory purposes, such as statements or proof of residency, etc. KYC documents. We don't want to resubmit those every single time we go into a bank or we switch banks. Right, so this evolution has been very consumer centric over the last 10 to 15 years, and that's what's seen this massive shift and rise of in the FinTech environment. Because opening a bank account, as can happen already in the world, from your phone with a selfie and a video and a bank account in 3 minutes, is for the newer generation. Right, the customer has changed. So the banks and the financial services space need to evolve to make sure that they are relevant to their customer base. Otherwise, they will lose out. Right? Historically, if you look at, for example, a bank, it offers a number of services across the board, from retail to everything, to savings, etc. They offer a wide bouquet of services. Where typically, if you look at the FinTechs right now, they are specialized in one of those verticals, and they are doing it better. So if you want to call it banks a jack of all trades, the FinTech would then be a specialist in a certain vertical. And there's been a shift in the thinking between those two parties over the last, specifically, probably 4 to 5 years. Even in some places around the world, there's still a lot of competition and animosity. It's a us versus them kind of discussion, banks versus the startups. Whereas, as you see, not only in the East, but also in the West, a lot more momentum has gained over the last 3 to 4 years, specifically about collaborations and working together. because the banks have realized that they are good at the trust aspect. They've got your trust. They regulate it, they are safe, and they've built a great reputation around that space. But when it comes to building customer-centric products, okay, and adapting those products quickly to the need of the market space, that's where they tend to be quite slow because of all the internal bureaucratic processes that need approval, more approval, etc. Build a product life cycle, build it out through a system process. By that time, the product might not be relevant or the consumers have moved on. Whereas the startups and the smaller companies that specialize are much better placed at servicing the needs of the client, the customers, such as me and you, and therefore they are able to acquire more customers quicker because they are providing a solution that a customer or a client has, right? And that's why we're seeing, for example, when I was in Singapore last, we saw massive partnership between the banks and the fintechs, because the fintechs using technology have the ability to onboard 30,000 customers a day by using technologies where the bank system couldn't. But the banks provided the stability in the process, so the fintech is client and consumer facing, and the bank provides the stability and the back end to all of these transactions. In other words, banks are not going to go out of fashion. Okay. It's not banks are obsolete, they're going to disappear overnight. They're going to be working more and more with the fintechs, and therefore their own business model is evolving during these times. Maybe to use another world life use case, if you will, we were having conversations with Africa's oldest bank, right, who now consider themselves a fintech. Okay, so they were a bank, and now they consider themselves a fintech because they've, over the last 4 to 5 years, they've gone through a digitization journey, and now they've evolved into this process to use technology more. So they've shifted, right? And as in any business and industry, if you don't change, if you don't evolve, you will be a dinosaur and you will be extinct. Right? And that's what fintech is driving, this innovation, this change in the financial services space, where the needs and the demands of the clients are being looked after, right? Cheaper, faster, and more secure. Okay, and that's kind of the whole thing we're seeing here. So the evolution versus revolution, but it's not a us versus them. It's moved to a more collaborative model of companies working hand in hand. And I can say it locally, for example. Let's use it once again, bring it back to the local scene. Last month or a month and a half ago, if you looked at the newspapers, we saw Sim Finance, which a lot of, if you are from Mauritius, you'll recognize the name. It's one of the big financial institutions and players in the space in Mauritius. They partnered with FinTechs, who I alluded to earlier, right? Because they're seeing a lot of value by working together and leveraging off the best of both worlds, so that they can actually, at the end of the day, it can benefit the consumer, and thereby potentially get more consumers to engage, and thereby it becomes a win-win situation for all. So we're seeing a lot more of these, and personally, the relationship for me between Sim and FinTechs shows the mindset we're moving towards. 3 years ago, when I arrived here, those kind of interactions wouldn't be happening. The fact that it's real now, it's happening. We're seeing a lot more of these collaborations. It's a big win for the ecosystem and for everybody involved, because that's just going to lead to more innovations, more change, and change is never a bad thing. So I just wanted to touch on the evolution versus the revolution aspect of the conversation. Now, FinTech, it has been thrown around. Everybody throws FinTech around. They are throwing. I was involved in a tourism day, if you will, and I was asked the question of, firstly, why am I here talking at a tourism day around FinTech? But to be honest with you, like I alluded earlier, the world is changing and it's going to impact it. I mean, at the time, which is I think 2 years ago, I said, imagine Mauritius creates a 3D virtual environment so that a customer in the UK can put on their 3D set, can interact with Mauritius in a day-to-day, can come here at any time and buy products. So buy products in a virtual environment using technology, and within 24 hours, Amazon delivers that, whatever you've bought from Mauritius in a virtual environment, from a real world context, and Amazon delivers that to your doorstep wherever you are in 24 hours. Okay. Some people thought it was batshit crazy, right? And probably it is, but that's the future that we are working towards, and technology would allow us to have that future, or one of those futures going forward. Right? So we need to make sure that there is a payment gateway. We need to make sure there's API integration. API basically means, I'll cover it, but basically it allows two pieces of technology to talk to each other. Right? So don't be scared of words like that. I'm going to share some cheat sheets a little bit later with everybody. So hopefully I can get that right. If not, please, I'll ask Lisa to email everybody who has participated today with the Saudi Arabian cheat sheets. So we've got a relationship with the Saudi Arabian FinTech Association, and they've done a cheat sheets, which is just a live touch explainer. And I'll show you what it looks like. We will be emailing that to you, and you can kind of go through all of this by yourself, because 50 minutes is not enough time to cover anything at all. But I'm just trying to demystify the space for everyone going forward. So what does FinTech cover? Right? We're good. There's a lot of categories here. A lot of it. We've heard of insurtech, we've heard of RegTech, we've heard of blockchain, we've heard of lending. It's a big portfolio, and people will argue for some of these. People will argue for and against some of these. It just depends on who you talk to. And for me, I'm not going to tell you what you should think. I think it's important for you to consume as much information as you can and come up with your own idea of what it is. But basically, for us, if anything that impacts technology in the financial services space is called FinTech. So technically here, if you look at, for example, the RegTech, the RegTech category, right? You know, if we're talking about the compliance, AML, KYC, and all of that good stuff, right? Which effectively impacts the financial services space, because why are you doing that in the first place? You might argue, well, RegTech, you know, me submitting my documentation, how is that FinTech? Well, what is the purpose of it? Okay, for me, what is the purpose of that process? The purpose of that process is for financial services companies to use that to make a decision about you, right? Therefore, it is impacting you, right? And it's impacting the financial services space, because they need that to make a decision when it comes to you. Right? If you look at, for example, another big conversation and talking point at the moment, blockchain and crypto. Right? Crypto is by itself a lot of debate, it could be weeks of debate and topics about it. You know, basically it's centralized versus decentralized, right? A lot of people have said, also crypto came about, what, 2009, there more or less, and people go, the fundamental of crypto, for example, is that governments and central banks control everything. They regulate everything, and I'll touch a little bit more about it. Whereas as cryptos are decentralized, and there's no one party that is telling you what to do with your own money. Okay, and I know it's more complicated than that, and they are using blockchain as a technology to build those virtual currencies on top of. So crypto is not blockchain. Depends. A lot of people go, oh, blockchain, that's automatically crypto. No, blockchain is the technology that's used. Blockchain can also be used in smart contracting, which technically will fall under here as well. And there's many instances of that technology being applied in various other ways. So cryptos is effectively blockchain, the technology being used and applied to create virtual currencies. Right? Once again, I'm not going to deep dive this. There's going to be a lot more. If you're interested in that, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of workshops that are going to be done over the next couple of months by ourselves, but there's a lot of great stuff that's happening out there, and a lot of our members will get to talk about that. Lending, we saw marketplace. So, for example, FinTechs was already spoken about in a document that I'll send to everybody. And I'm going to see now if I can switch this, because it does have new share. There we go. I'm hoping everybody sees this. So everybody who's here will be getting this from us. So we've got approval to be able to send this out to everybody. This was with the chief piece I was setting about. This gives you a little bit more detail around each vertical, right? With some examples, okay, and some regulations around it. And yes, it's the society rated, but we work together. Instead of us replicating, they use some of our stuff, we use some of their stuff, because that's what open collaboration is all about. The premise and the content are the same. So you're going to be getting this. For example, payments and currency exchange, you can see some of it, you can read about it. I am not going to deep dive this into all the verticals, because there's just way too much information for a 15-minute session. You can see here, for example, neobanks, right? Basically, a lot of it, or challenger banks or digital banks, you know, so those are banks that don't have branches, physical branches. Everything's based in technology and then cloud. So all of that type of stuff in verticals will be covered in the sheet that we will be sending. Just please go through it. And if you have questions, there's a lot of content out there that we have, all content out there for you to consume at your own kind of request. So you'll be getting a copy of this. And for me, the nice thing about this is that they give you examples at the bottom. Okay, so you can Google them, you can find out more about them, and you can learn yourself and add a lot of value to your knowledge base. So I'm not going to go through that, because I'm very conscious that we're already 40 minutes in. Alrighty, and we are back to this. I don't know if I'm presenting. Yes, I was presenting. Apologies about that. All right, perfect. So, all right, so there's a lot of stuff to consume here. You will be getting a supplement sheet on top of this, so you'll be able to go through it in your own time. Once again, the relevance of it, okay, how is it impacting and what is happening around the world? Well, you're seeing a lot of shifts happening in the technology space, right? There's a lot of arguments, a lot of great discussions out there, one of which is my favorite, that says, you know, in 10 years' time, we're not going to probably have sectors and companies like we have now. We're going to have probably technology companies that are going to have certain verticals. So you're not going to have a mining company, you're going to have a technology company that specializes in mining. Okay, and there's a lot of great debates out there. The reason I utilize this is because there's a lot of conversations happening, like something that that's still quite relatively newish in that sense, or changing, evolving at a rapid pace. It's good to keep abreast of what's happening. So Alipay, for example, they have 1 billion users, right, in a couple of years, right? If you look at the bottom on the slide here, we're seeing MNOs or mobile network operators. You know, they are no longer just cell phone or technology companies. They are also providing financial services products to their consumers. So for me, what that shows, and we've done a couple of projects in the past with telcos, is that I think they realized, some of them have realized many years ago, that voice and data are going to inherently go to almost a zero cost base. Right, because of competition, because of everything that's happening on the ground, we're seeing a lot more services being almost offered, some of which potentially add cost. In other words, for them to survive and be relevant, what do they need to do in order to evolve themselves in whatever they had? And if you look at, for example, M-Pesa, and you look at MTN Money, and you look at all of these guys playing in the space, they've realized that they've got 40, 50 million people, customers, and what they can do is, if they evolve themselves and provide opportunities to their existing customer base, they have effectively shifted their business models. Right? So 10 years ago, you had telcos. Now you've got telcos with banking licenses. Right? Now, where do you put them there? Right? Give me where's the category now? Now you've got what hardwoods, right? New things happening all the time because they themselves are evolving and changing to adapt to the current world that's at the moment changing very, very rapidly. This is quite interesting. This is just a statistic around the adoption of FinTech. So one challenge that we face from any form of technology, not just FinTech, right, is that people are quite skeptical, right? Whenever there's a new technology out there, people tend to be very skeptical about using it. Right? Can you imagine the first time you were told that there's something in a wall that you can approach and you put in a 4 or 5 digits into it and it will give you money, your money, okay? I know for us now at the moment it might seem like, you know, ridiculous, okay, but when that came out, that was probably viewed right now as some of the things happening in today's day and age, right? So there's always going to be skepticism with any new technology. One thing we know for certain though is that banks are not going anywhere, right? They might change, and we're seeing some shifts happening, for example, in the East, where banks, some of the banking teams that I've spoken to consider themselves the future custodians of data, not just money, right? So they're moving into providing, making sure the banking, they are the trusted partner in the equation. FinTechs go to market, so they're also evolving themselves. And FinTechs will keep innovating, keep pushing, because every time there's an opportunity, somebody will come up with an idea and they'll go and action it and potentially solve a problem that has been existing for a long time. So one thing we can bank on is innovation will not stop. Change will not stop. We as a species are evolving, and technology is allowing us to evolve quicker. And when it comes to the financial technology space or FinTech space, it's happening quite rapidly. So we're seeing a lot happening in this space, a lot, right? We're also seeing a lot of failure in this space. I mean, as a startup, it's hard. I mean, what's it? 82% of all startups fail year one, irrespective of what industry you're in. Now you're playing in a financial services space. There was an interesting article where we were saying that it takes on average 5 to 7 years to become profitable. Okay, 5 to 7 years to become profitable as a FinTech. That is a long time. So we're seeing these massive yields, massive valuations coming through, but they need, because they're providing products that are much cheaper than the regular kind of financial services space, they need to make it up by volume. Right? So therefore, it takes time, it takes adoption. It's about building trust with consumers who will believe that what you do, what you say you will do on the back end. Right? If you pick a mango tree, you'll have 20 people say they're a FinTech company, and people go, well, where, what, how, where do I go from now? So there's also a lot of confusion happening in the space, and there will always be some people taking advantage of that confusion. The only problem is ignorance. People take advantage of ignorance. So for us, sessions such as today is to empower you to understand a little bit more, hopefully, and just keep building your knowledge base, reading, attending, etc., going forward. Very quick one, because I'm already being pinged around the time aspect. This basically, for me and for us, is the world's changing. Everything is digitizing, right? There's a lot of fears at the moment that technology is going to take our jobs. I don't believe so. I've been involved in projects where people have been retrained to do jobs that add more value, and machines take over the lower aspect, the repetitive stuff that actually nobody wants to do. So they're not per se taking over our jobs. I think we're going to see a shift in retraining ourselves as human beings to the new jobs of the future. Right? My parents, for example, started in one aspect, might have been the same job for 20, 30 years. And towards the end, in today's day and age, they might have had more career changes happening over the last 10 years than they did their whole life. In today's day and age, that is going to change constantly. Right? Only because everybody has ADHD and they want to move on, and after 1 year, they want to try and do something new, driven by the youth. but also because we have a limited time and we want to experience all of these things going forward. So we're seeing a rise in the gig economies, the sharing economy. So for example, Uber, why must I pay a taxi or buy my own car when I can share with other people? Airbnb, we're seeing driven technology, cybersecurity, massive shift and massive focus at the moment, massive. COVID's driven the adoption of fintech and technology because people had to still buy groceries or live their lives, if you will, through technology, right? But with that comes a risk, right? And we've got to make sure that people educate themselves around those risks. So there's always going to be risks. I'll use a personal story where my brother was driving in South Africa, and I think he used his credit card at a toll booth in a different county or province or whatever you want to call it. And a couple of hours later, he was notified by his bank, called by his bank to say, "We noticed you purchasing, you're purchasing furniture in a place that you aren't residents in." Right? So they used AI and backend and certain algorithms to predict that he was buying things that aren't he shouldn't be buying, okay, like furniture somewhere where he doesn't live, and therefore able to flag it and prevent that card being used and flag it as fraud, which it was. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of emphasis being put on cybersecurity. We're seeing a lot of reports specifically around COVID, cyber and fraud on the up. Okay, because a lot of this generally we've been forced to adopt the technology, and some people, specifically the older generation, without being ageist, tend to be more skeptical about adopting. Whereas the younger generation, my son, my 10-year-old, is probably more fluent on the cell phone than I am at the moment, right? So because they are digital natives, they adopt and consume technology at a faster rate. So there always will be inherent risks associated around it, but it will not stop the process moving forward. So we're living very much in a digital world, and a financial services space is no different than anything else. Very last space, because once again, I'm going to be paying regulation space. FinTech is probably, outside of medicine, the second most regulated space in the industry in the world, right? Outside of your health, money is massive, okay? There's a lot of regulation out there, and it impacts what you are able to do and how you're able to do it. If you look at, for example, Nigeria, overnight, one stage, I think last year, central bank just decided to ban cryptocurrencies straight off the bat, just like that. Okay, so it's an important factor. It's important to keep up to date with what's happening. Mauritius has a sandbox license, which effectively allows you to play and experiment and learn from it. There's other jurisdictions around the world that has it. I brought it in here because regulation impacts very heavily the fintech space going forward. If the regulators are not on board, are not up to speed with what's going on, this industry and this sector will not thrive and will be stuck. Okay, I just want to highlight that. African purpose, once again, massive opportunity. If you look at the stats, I think 56% of adults or 56% of the population or adults in Nigeria are unbanked or underbanked. Okay. Once again, a lot of opportunities around financial inclusion, a lot of opportunity to get into participate in the digital economy, etc., going forward. So Africa is seeing massive jumps. There's, if you saw from the numbers, I'll jump here quickly. If you see at the bottom here, this was a prediction of the mobile users. Okay, keeping in mind we have 1.4 billion people on the continent, and by 2025, it's estimated that only half of them will be mobile subscribers, right? A third of them will have access to internet. So there's still challenges that exist on the continent, specifically in Africa, but that also leads to opportunities for startups, for banks, for fintechs to come and play in the space, to be more inclusive of the people on the ground. And I'm going to wrap it up there because I am now fully being spammed by all around, and I know it's a lot of information I'm trying to cram in there, but I'm hoping that not only has it whet your appetite, because this is not going to satisfy or shouldn't satisfy your fintech itch, This should try to whet your appetite to try and learn more, and some of the information you're going to be getting from us post this hopefully empowers you with more knowledge on the ground. So I'm going to leave it at that, and as Buzz Lightyear says, to infinity and beyond. Hopefully we can have some good questions and discussion going forward. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mix, for that whirlwind tour through the FinTech ecosystem. As you said yourself, an enormous sector and an awful lot of different verticals to explore there. So you can never do it justice in such a short amount of time. But we do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to jump right into it because we are a bit short on time, so we may not get to everything, but let's kick off with the first that came in. With the increase of online stores, no matter what products they sell, are there any campaigns by MAFH to educate these merchants about the benefits of turning to FinTech in Mauritius? If yes, how is this being carried out and in what frequency?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. There we go.
Okay. So a quick one to that, about the very nature of it being an online store, it's already utilizing technology and financial services in some way and form. If you're paying or using a credit card or interacting in some way, they already have it. It's part of that. And how are we educating it? So there's multiple ways that it needs to happen. So I'll answer it in two ways. For us, there's a FinTech, which is the industry itself. So you've got your financial services and the FinTech, etc. But you also have the other side of the coin. I think this is what the question is talking about, the consumers of their technology, right? So it's no good developing the best FinTech product, whatever they might be, but nobody actually uses that product, right? So to answer that question, yes, there's a lot happening to educate people on the ground. I think Lisa, I mean, we're a small association, but there's a lot of people out there who are doing this every single day. I think Lisa, you yourself were at Women's Entrepreneurs yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, doing a presentation in education. So we work for a lot of other associations to spread the word. It's not only us, it's a lot of people doing it out there, and it's happening a lot. Could a lot more be happening? 100%. Locally, I think it's even BOM's mandate for financial inclusion to be included in a number of spaces, which hopefully then will lead to that growing even more on the ground. I hope I've answered that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and just to reiterate, yes, I was doing a workshop with women entrepreneurs and small SMEs yesterday. It is something that we try to do as often as we get the opportunity. And as Nick said, we also we set on a number of committees at BOM, for example, to push this agenda at government level. So we look forward to seeing much more traction on financial literacy in this space coming soon. So next question. What are your opinions about the need to teach FinTech from a young age?
Oh, 9,057%, as I like to call it. I think the fact that the youth, I think, are already there, to be honest with you. Their consumption of technology and its impact is happening day to day. At schools, though, I would like to stress that we need to do, and for example, Lisa has had conversations with the education department in Mauritius. How do we get coding into school level? Right? The younger we can go, the better the understanding is. Because so if FinTech per se as a subject, I think might be. It can be done in a very fun way. For example, entrepreneurship day, utilizing your cell phones to build up little business plans and stores. I think that's critical. I think that understanding interaction with money, the younger, the better. It's already being done in some schools. I think not all, and I think we need to standardize that, but also give the youngsters more access to technology, not to play games and everything in moderation, but to make them aware of technology and the impact it has and drive their appetite for it, because they're hungry to learn.
No, I absolutely agree. Right, so it seems that a lot of people in Mauritius still have a preference for traditional ways of handling money. For example, they would rather collect their pension at the post office rather than do a bank transfer. Is it probably due to skepticism about new technology? Do you see this trend changing soon? And how can we accelerate the adoption of FinTech by Mauritians?
That's a great question. There's a couple of arguments that points to this. I'll try to be quite brief. So I was talking to someone who was in the bank queue, and they, for example, told me that it's their family of Saturday event that they come to the bank together, and then they go through it. So it's been part of their lifestyle and almost a family activity, like might be go to the beach. Okay, all right. For me, I just find it weird. Okay, but everybody to their own. I think there's a certain level of not misconception, but also not knowing that the technology exists. And I'll give you a local example. FinTechs did an activity where they through one of their startups was an elderly lady, 60 years plus, who was running her own business, who never used technology or juice before. Right? And through the interaction of raising money for her business through the crowdfunding platform FinTechs, she became aware that the MCP juice exists, and for the first time used it at the age of 60 something. Okay, and now she doesn't go back into the bank branch. So I think there's an element of education that we still need to work on. I mean, Mauritius has the highest banked population in Africa, right? But I think there's still a lot of cash going on. So I think education will alleviate that. And how can we change, accelerate the adoption of it? I think the more you talk with your family members, with your communities, and make them aware that this is what is happening, it is safe, it's okay. Look, granddad, I'm using this, I'm going to send you 200 rupees right now. Here it is, here's the money, it's in your account. You didn't have to move, we didn't have to move from our chair. It's real, it's safe, you can do it.
Yeah, I think to echo Migs there, I would add, we do definitely see this change happening on the ground and accelerating. If I think about the workshop that I did yesterday with women entrepreneurs and contrast it with one I did only 2 years ago, in that first in that original workshop, platforms were actively using them. I think I maybe got one hand go up in the room. Yesterday, it was like preaching to the converted. The room was full of people all using this technology. And I think that, that speaks very much for itself. Once one person starts adoption, they tell a few people, they tell their neighbors. This is how we reach that critical mass point at which you start to see kind of wholesale adoption. So, right now, next question. Where have we got to? About putting regulations on blockchain. So this is somebody who's interested in whether regulations can go on the blockchain, and they followed up with a second question about whether blockchain is going to be taxed. Any thoughts on that?
I think they'll probably move towards, put it this way, regulations are a set of rules, right? What is coding and programming? It's a set of rules, okay? If this, then that. So could it go that way? Potentially, not 100%. It's just a matter of appetite and willingness for the parties to do it. Okay. So if I'm understanding that question correctly, around regulation, the regulations themselves put on the blockchain, I think that's doable, 100%. But it's going to be an appetite from regulators and government to do it. And to answer the second question, is blockchain going to be taxed? So blockchain is just a technology aspect. And so if you're applying that technology in whatever sector you're going, so let's say, for example, you're a lawyer and using blockchain for legal purposes, and therefore you're providing a service using the technology, at the end of the day, there's only two things we can be sure of in life, and that's taxes and death. Okay? You'll be taxed. Government will have their say in some way and form. So if you're providing services, whether it's a small company tax, or you have personal individual and your own income tax in some way and form, it will be taxed. But that's life, I suppose. So the tech itself, application, the tech and providing the services that you do, it does no matter what you do.
Great. So we are actually run out of time. I'm going to squeeze one more question in, but I'm afraid we're not going to get to all the others. So the final question for today is there a gap in laws and regulations specified for FinTech Africa countries compared to first world countries?
So is there a gap in laws and regulations? So I think it's a great question, and I think it's a tricky one because regulations are quite area jurisdiction specific. Okay, so for example, if you look at Malta, for example, it's one of the biggest online gambling places in the world. So their regulation for online gambling is probably one of the best in the world because they have to regulate that as an industry, right? It's a tough question to answer. If you're looking gap by comparison basis, on paper, I don't think so. So let's say, for example, if you look at the Mauritius RSL, on paper, I would probably put it the same as the FCA in the UK or the MAS one out of Singapore on paper, right? Because they're trying to do something specific. It's the application or an execution of that regulation in real time, in real life, that might be different. And at different stages. So not only is it situational based on what you're specializing in, because you can't be a master of everything, right? And regulators themselves need to keep up to abreast about what is happening in this space. So in Mauritius context, we're an international financial center, right? So we've got a basis to work from. And when it comes to asset managers and the regulations around that, we do have some regulation. Is as advanced or as some of the other countries? In some respects, yes. In some respects, no. But for me, that'll be more jurisdictional comparison than by just saying this is better than ours. Because quite frankly, Mauritius, it won't take a lot to be a leader in this space in certain fields, and potentially other people to copy us. But it requires the will. It requires an understanding of what you want to do and where you want to go. And then the willingness to execute. If that's not there, then yes, there will be a lot of gaps in the ground because you're going to be talking and going nowhere.
Okay, right. Well, thank you so much there. We have run over slightly, so thank you for all your questions. Thank you so much, Migs, for your time this afternoon. We hope that everybody here who's attended this afternoon has a little bit more of a window into the FinTech space. And we look forward to welcoming you to future events. The best way to learn more about FinTech is to keep track of what we're up to, sign up for our newsletter online, keep an eye on our social media, and we look forward to welcoming you to future MAFH events in the not too distant future. Thanks so much, Migs, and thank you all for your participation.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.